Okay. Thank you all for coming out, and I want to thank my supporters here who are here. Most of you got a phone call late last night, and I want to thank you for coming out. And thank you for everything you did with the gubernatorial campaign. I'll cut right to the chase. Today I'm terminating my campaign for governor, and I'm going to enter the race for state auditor, which is a position I held from 2003 to 2007. And I don't make this decision lightly, but after much reflection, it's a decision that I make without hesitation. Now, the decision to run for public office is never strictly a personal one. A lot of people put faith in you and their trust in you. They put their money behind you, and I can't dismiss their loyalty in making my decision to make this change. And it's also a decision, I believe, that's right for me. But it's also ultimately a good decision for my supporters, for the Republican Party, and most importantly, for the people of Minnesota. These are serious, serious financial times in Minnesota. The outcome of the next election at all levels of the ticket is going to determine whether Minnesota remains a high-tax state or Minnesota restores the fundamental principles of limited constitutional government. And while I believe that the conventional wisdom, I believe that only a fiscally conservative Republican governor can preserve some of the economic sanity in Minnesota, I also believe that putting all of the Republican Party's eggs and Minnesota's future prosperity into one basket of the governor's race is not a good strategy. We're less than a month away from the state caucuses. And even still, we have 7 of the 9 original candidates still running for the Republican nomination, and I understand we had a new one on Friday. Rumors are swirling still that the field isn't set yet. And since Governor Pawlenty announced that he's not seeking a 3rd term, the focus of the Republican Party has really been exclusively on the race for governor. And nonetheless, a number of key players in the party have remained on the sidelines, waiting for Godot to show up. I can say it's been frustrating. In those two situations, the frustration and the uncertainty surrounding the governor's race and the singular focus of the Republican Party on the governor's race has been gnawing at me for the past 2 months. And the more I thought about this situation, the clearer it became that ultimately, during this time of financial and political uncertainty, there's an opportunity to convert the state auditor's office from the passive organization that it's been in the last 3 years to an active and dynamic agent to reform within state government. To stop and think about it, the state auditor is a constitutional officer independent of the legislature and the governor, irrespective of who controls those branches of government. The state auditor cannot veto bills, but she can sponsor legislation, and she can use her office as a bully pulpit to influence public opinion. And a well-respected state auditor is looked to for opinions on legislation that affect local units of government. Everything from local government aid formulas to city and county and school district mandates, even the effectiveness of Job Z and TIF districts. But the state auditor doesn't need to wait to be asked her opinion. An active state auditor who zealously guards her independence will be out in front of the curve, collecting and analyzing data and framing the issue in the terms of what's best for Minnesota. She's the taxpayer's watchdog, but she allows neither the legislature nor the governor to play politics with Minnesota's money and their finances. And certainly the scope of influence of the state auditor is less than the governor, but the agenda my gubernatorial campaign focused on: financial reform, reforming the relationship of state and local government. These are all issues where an active state auditor can wield a lot of influence. And from day one of this campaign, I've run a campaign of substance and principle-based reform, and I've garnered a lot of notable press coverage. And amusingly, I think I've even confounded some of the liberal bloggers who don't know how to deal with a pro-liberty conservative who argues from economic principle rather than from ideology. And I'll carry those ideas into the auditor's race. And a primary function of the state auditor is to ensure local units of government are spending taxpayers' dollars wisely. But that limited vision of the office is not enough. I do not share the opinion of the current occupant of the office that the state auditor is the, quote, Rodney Dangerfield of constitutional offices, one not always getting respect. That's only true if the state auditor acts like Rodney Dangerfield. And I understand the current resident of the auditor's office is touting bigger computer screens and telecommuting and better forms and technology updates and helping local governments with energy costs as some of the accomplishments of her tenure. What you see on this table is just samples of investigations that my staff conducted and press coverage. Each of these binders is filled with press coverage that was garnered on my watch as state auditor. And during my term, I sponsored major pension reform, including the Minneapolis teachers merger, a cap on benefits on state pension funds, a rewrite of the entire fire relief code. I passed legislation allowing the state auditor more leeway to privatize audits, and I did it. And I moved several offices, and I downsized my staff. And we made huge news several times, busting bad guys for swindling local governments. We even did 3 best practices reviews, not 1. And we started the first ever school district spending reports. And we did several special studies, including a groundbreaking study on local government aid and a study on school superintendent pay. We busted the Minneapolis Police and Fires Fund for misappropriation of public money to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. And that's a lawsuit the city of Minneapolis is still dealing with. No one was comparing the state auditor's office to Rodney Dangerfield when I was there. And I'll bring that level of respect back to the office and that level of commitment to protecting tax dollars for the people of Minnesota. And let me add a final idea before I take your questions. You know, reports that are gathering dust on a shelf or today's headlines that are at the bottom of a bird cage aren't adequate measures really to judge a state auditor. This pile of paper isn't an end in itself. It's the means to changing attitudes and making real reforms. And an active state auditor does more than uncover problems. She points the way to structural reforms that prevent problems in the future. Another activity that's been absent from the state auditor's office today. The state auditor is responsible for ferreting out waste, fraud, and abuse in local units of government, cities, counties, school districts, even the Met Council. Uncovering examples of waste, fraud, and abuse makes for good headlines, and it certainly saves the state some money and marginally improves government operations. But in the long term, that narrow operational focus really does little to get at the fundamental structural problems of big government. I see the job of state auditor as more than just making the status quo work a little better. We must reform the relationship between state and local government. And the state auditor should play a significant role in that process. The current discord between local officials complaining about lack of state aid funding to local governments and then state officials finger-pointing at local officials is a direct result, I believe, of having a passive state auditor and a failure to clearly define the legitimate and the distinct obligations of state and local governments to Minnesotans. The state should provide local units of government more freedom to do what they deem in the best interest of their residents. And that's why in my term as state auditor, I secured legislation giving the state auditor authority to give waivers on state mandates to local units of government. Now on the flip side, state government has a duty to make sure that local governments provide adequate essential services through their own taxing base or with state aid. But if a local unit of government decides to provide a high level of non-essential services, local government should pay for it locally after taking care of their essential services. But during my tenure as state auditor, I made the phrase essential services part of local government vocabulary. And granted, these words stuck in the throats of some local officials who wanted all their spending desires to be deemed essential. But nonetheless, my office made gigantic strides in redefining the way local governments looked at responsibilities to taxpayers. As a former mayor of Eagan who had many a battle with Ted Mondale over who ran the city of Eagan, the people of Egan or Mondale City Council, I can tell you that increasing the independence of counties, school districts, and cities to determine their own development and destinies, really putting the responsibilities for local development on local shoulders, is the best way to encourage the fiscal responsibility that state officials complain is lacking at the local level. An active state auditor is what I was, and an active state auditor is what I will be. I have a proven track record, attested to the fact that in my re-election bid, I was endorsed over the current auditor by virtually every newspaper in the state. Even those papers that regularly editorialized about that my essential services policy was too strident agreed that on my watch, the state auditor's office was in effective and competent hands. And in today's financial climate, every penny really does count. But I'll be a state auditor that does more than look for change under the couch. I'll be an active state auditor that uses the office to push for the necessary reforms Minnesota must make to be competitive in a prosperous state. Minnesotans expect no less from any elected official, and I expect no less from myself. Thank you, and I'll take questions.
Are you going to back another candidate in the Republican field of the Democratic candidate?
I am focused right now on the auditor's race. There are other candidates, Republican candidates, and I'm going to be out there asking Republican delegates for their support.
How much was Norm Coleman's shadow over the race affecting your decision?
I think it's been the shadow, as we call it. I've talked about it before in the press, and I think that the shadow is real, and it's affected all of us as candidates because there are, as I say, people waiting for Godot to show up. I don't know whether Norm is Godot or whether there will even be one, but it certainly has affected things.
Okay, you have an impressive list of accomplishments here. What happened in 2006? Why were you not reelected, in your mind?
2006 was a tsunami against the Republican Party. We lost both houses of Congress. We lost, Gil Gutnick lost, Mayor Kiffmeyer lost, I lost. We lost control of the Republican caucus here in Minnesota, and it was just, you know, these are down ballot races, and there were a lot of people that were just taken out in a huge way.
Do you see the tide turning?
I see the tide turning, and I believe that even given a neutral environment here in the state of Minnesota, Republicans are going to do very well all across, even in a neutral environment, and I think it's going to be better than neutral. People are you know, citizens are worried, and they should be. They're concerned about their future. We have high unemployment. We have every one of the Democrats is running for governor is promising huge tax increases, and people can't afford that. We have a lot of problems in the state of Minnesota, and a huge, huge budget deficit. And I think it's going to be very clear come November what the two different visions are, not only within the governor's race, but within the auditor's race also, and these legislative races. And I think that the public will choose fiscal sanity. They will choose candidates that can get the job done and are going to watch out for their tax dollars.
Do you think being a woman made running for governor more difficult?
I don't believe the gender plays. I've never, you know, I've never even talked about my gender, so I don't think that made any difference whatsoever. You know, in the governor's race, I was in the top third of candidates, and then stayed there, and you know, so I don't think you can argue, you know, one way or another in that case. So.
What did you think of Councilor getting the endorsement?
It depends on what the field is. So, you know, I think that's.
Is that one of the reasons you decided not to run?
Is
that one of the reasons?
You know, I have been, when I started out last summer, or I would say last spring, I really believed the governor was going to run for a third term. I thought he would. And my intention was to run again for state auditor. And when he did run, I caught everyone by surprise. I mean, he did have some of the big name candidates, and the Brian Sullivans and the Norm Colemans at the time, and I threw my hat in the ring for governor, so I always had this was always what I was thinking I was going to do originally. Over the past several months, it's become apparent that the field probably isn't set, and you know, it's been a very fluid race, as we all know, and you have candidates in and out, and there's 20 candidates, I think, still, and the number's growing. everybody in the state is so focused on the governor's race. And yet there are all of, these other constitutional offices which are of vital importance, and the legislative seats are of vital importance. And we need to recognize that, we, especially in the Republican Party, because we don't hold any of the constitutional offices, the down ballot offices right now, that we need good, solid, conservative, fiscally conservative candidates in these races, especially in the auditor's race. This is the taxpayer's watchdog. It is the only elected position that is out there fighting the bad guys, fighting for financial sanity. And we've got to have a strong watchdog here in Minnesota, especially given these times.
Did any of the other candidates approach you to talk about trying to be maybe being their running mate, lieutenant governor running mate, or anything like that?
I don't want to talk about the governor's race. So whether anything occur, I have zero desire to serve in that role under any candidate. So I am probably a little too independent for most folks. I love the job of auditor, and I want to be the state auditor again. It fits my strengths. I'm a financial person. I'm a fiscal person. I'm a bulldog, and this fits my skill set very much.
Now that Senator Coleman's out, or now that you're out of the governor's race, do you think Senator Coleman should get into it?
I don't have any opinions about that, and I think you can talk to the activists and talk to the candidates themselves about that.
How hard was raising money? You've mentioned that Coleman and other factors.
Raising money has been difficult for all of the Republican candidates. You have to recognize that a year and a half ago, Norm Coleman raised $12 million, whatever he raised, and a lot of those folks out there, I think, are pushing him to get in. I don't know whether he'll get in. You need to talk to him about that. So it's been, like I said, waiting for Godot, and people want to know, what's this person going to do? What's this going to do? There's a lot of Brian Sullivan rumors in November. They were making calls, and so it's late. The fact is that it is 3.5 months before the nominating convention, and it's actually late in the game. Yet I think the public thinks the election's a long time away, and a lot of the folks out there think it's a long time away. But it's not. It's very late in the game right now.
To follow up on that, are you suggesting that because of the large amounts that Republican donors had to give Senator Coleman during the recount, that's reflected in weak fundraising for the gubernatorial?
No, I'm not suggesting that. No.
How much did you raise?
I'll release that at the end of the month. So.
And can you transfer all of that to your auditors?
There's limits on what you can do. And campaign finance, I signed the public subsidy. I have had an open auditor campaign since the last election. I never closed it. I have campaign finance. I signed the public subsidy agreement in 2007. I did not sign up for the governor's race, so it follows. And the way the law works is every dime I spend after January 1 this year in the governor's race counts against my auditor limits. And so decisions had to be made myself personally. Just like last fall, I had already spent the auditor limit long before, and so I would not have been able to campaign for auditor. Does that make sense? So I was in a quandary in that sense. I had to make decisions. And again, it is late in the game. It is 3.5 months before the nominating convention.
When was this tipping moment that you made the decision?
The final decision? Last week.
What happened?
I don't want to talk about that. So.
Is there anything you'll do differently in your rematch with Rebecca Otto that you didn't do in 2006? Anything that you saw last time that maybe you would have done differently?
We're gonna, my audit team is going to, think that through and talk that through. I think we ran a pretty good campaign. The fact is that the summer of 2006, as Republicans were, their numbers nationally were dropping. There wasn't much you could do, and we knew that the summer of 2006, all across the ticket.
This uncertainty that you talked about several times of being late in the game, is that going to hurt Republican prospects to keep the governor's office in November, this sort of uncertainty in the field lagging into?
Well, I don't think uncertainty can continue much longer because, again, it is late in the game. And I think you're going to see things shape up, probably on both sides of the aisle, although it seems like none of the Democrats are going anywhere. But I think you're going to see, you know, things shaping up here over the next couple of weeks.
Auditor put out a press release today, saying that your tenure as auditor was marked by errors in accounting and procedures. Do you have anything to say about that?
That's inaccurate, she knows that. We fought that battle in '06, so, during the campaign in '06, she went through every single, there's 3 times as many studies with a fine-tooth comb and found tiny little numbers in backs of tables that weren't accurate, and, when she's done with that, meant nothing. So it was, you know, if she wants to campaign on that again, maybe she will. So I haven't gone through her reports with any fine-tooth comb. Frankly, I don't know if they even exist. She's done very little in her tenure as auditor. I think she's done the very basic minimum. She's done no special studies. She did one little thing on how to insulate government buildings, and it's been, you know, frankly, it's really been a shame for Minnesotans because we need an active auditor in that office.
Who benefits most, do you think, from your departure from the governor's race? Which other candidate might get most of your supporters, do you think?
Well, my supporters are, you know, going to support who they want. I'm not asking them to support any one particular candidate. I think it's pretty well known that I shared a lot of support with Tom Emmer, and I suspect that he'll be the biggest beneficiary of this move. But you can ask him. There's some folks in the room. Other questions?
How important is a strong gubernatorial candidate to these down delegates?
It's vitally important. In '06, and I don't blame it on anyone, but we had Mark Kennedy at the top of the ticket. I think he lost by 23 points or something. And but I think that was just the year. It was a bad year in 2006 for Republicans. And I think I do think it's vitally important. We need to run as a ticket. Whatever comes out of the conventions or the primary or whatever we're going to end up having, we have to run as a ticket, run as a team. And I think that, I believe that we will.
Your withdrawal seems to be precipitated based on the fact that Coleman may get in or something of that order, then that would be a contentious primary. How can a contentious primary benefit a down ballot candidate in the fall?
A contentious primary is bad for the Republican Party, period.
Do you think Coleman's going to run?
You can ask Norm Coleman. I don't want to speculate. I've done too much of it already, probably. So. Other questions? Thank you all for coming out. Thank you.